Her hand finds my wrist before I am ready. I have been sitting beside her bed for 40 minutes watching the machines, and not watching her face, because watching her face means admitting what the machines are already saying, and I am not ready to admit that yet. Then her fingers close around my wrist with a strength I did not know she still had, and I look at her, and her eyes are open. "Read me the psalm about the shepherd," she whispers, before I close my eyes. The machines keep beeping. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opens and closes. I sit completely still with her fingers on my wrist, and I think, we do not own a Bible. We have never owned a Bible. In 40 years of her life that I have been present for, in every corner of every room she has ever lived in, there has never been a Bible. I say, "Tita," she closes her eyes. Not in sleep, in waiting. I find it in the bedside drawer, beneath a folded visitor's pamphlet, and a pen with no cap. A Gideon's Bible, small and brown, left by someone who passed through this room before us. My hands are shaking when I open it. I have never held one before. I do not know where Psalms begins. I find it by accident, paging through, recognizing the shape of the chapters before I recognize the name. Chapter 23. I stare at the number. I look at the door. I look at my grandmother. I begin to read. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Her lips move. I stop. I watch her lips move through the words, a half second before I reach them on the page, and something cold moves through me that is not fear exactly, though it is close to fear. It is what sits just behind fear. I keep reading because she is still waiting, because her hand is still on my wrist, because stopping feels worse than continuing. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." Her breathing changes. Not worse, easier. The shallow, labored pull of the last 2 days begins to slow into something that sounds almost like rest. And her hands, which have been trembling since Tuesday, go still against the blanket. The room does something I cannot explain. There is no other word for it. The room does something. The quality of the air changes the way air changes before rain, some drop in pressure that you feel in your ears and your chest before you understand what is happening. The nurse, who has been moving quietly at the edge of the room, slows her movements without appearing to notice that she has. The sounds from the corridor soften. I am aware that I am reading more slowly than I was a moment ago, and I do not remember deciding to. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. My grandmother turns her head, not toward me, away from me, toward the corner of the room beside the window where nothing is, where nothing has been all afternoon, where I have been looking and seeing only wall and the edge of the curtain and the gray light coming through. She turns her head toward that corner, and she smiles. The smile is not for me. I understand this immediately and completely. It belongs to whatever she is seeing, and what she is seeing is not in the room the way I am in the room. What she is seeing is there in a way I cannot access. I can only watch her face change the way a face changes when someone you love walks through a door after a long time away. Her hand lifts from my wrist. She lifts it toward the corner. She whispers something that is not Arabic and not a name I know. It is only 2 syllables, and one of them is soft, and the room holds the sound for a moment longer than it should. Then she lowers her hand. Then she closes her eyes. Her breathing completes itself in 4 more breaths, and each one is quieter than the last. And the 4th one is the last one. And after it, the room is very still, and the machines begin making a different sound, and the nurse moves quickly now, and I am still sitting with the open Bible in my hands, looking at the corner of the room where my grandmother had been looking. There is nothing there. There is nothing there, and the curtain is not moving, and the light is the same gray it has been all afternoon. I stare at the corner until the nurse puts her hand on my shoulder. I stare at it until my aunt arrives through the door, with her coat still on, and her face already knowing. I stare at it while the doctor comes and speaks quietly and writes something on a form. My relatives believe she died peacefully. She did die peacefully. That part is true. But I cannot stop seeing the direction she turned. I cannot stop seeing her hand lift, and I cannot stop hearing those 2 syllables, soft in the room, before the last 4 breaths. Everything should be finished now. I reach out and close the Bible. Inside the front cover, between Psalm 23 and Psalm 24, something is pressed flat. I almost miss it, because I am closing the Bible quickly, covering it with my hands the way you cover something you are not supposed to have, a leaf. Dried and pale, the color of old paper, the shape of something that grew near water, an olive leaf, I think, though I have no reason to be certain. It has been pressed so long, it has taken the shape of the pages around it. I turn it over. 4 words, in my grandmother's handwriting. He always keeps promises. I know her handwriting. I grew up watching it move across letters and grocery lists and the margins of her prayer books. This is hers. There is no question. I stand in the hospital room with my relatives moving around me, and the machines silenced now, and the doctor completing his paperwork, and I hold this dried leaf and read those 4 words 3 times. Then I tell myself that someone else must have written it, a previous owner, a visitor, someone who left the Bible in this drawer before us, before this room was ours for these 3 days. I put the leaf in my pocket. I tell myself I put it there to throw it away later. I do not throw it away. That night I sleep in my own bed with the leaf on the nightstand and the Bible is not there because I left it in the drawer where I found it. This is what I tell myself when I check. I left it there because it was not mine to take. I dream of my grandmother's face turned toward the corner. In the dream, the corner is not empty, but I cannot see what is there. I can only see her looking at it, and her face in the dream is the same as her face in the room, the particular quality of someone who has been waiting a long time for something and has now stopped waiting. I wake before dawn and lie still, and the dream dissolves the way dreams do, leaving only the feeling of it. I tell myself it is grief. It is probably grief. I close my eyes and wait for morning. The funeral coordinator is a careful man with a clipboard and a voice shaped for exactly this kind of room. We sit across from him at a wide table, going through the sequence of the service, and he is precise and unhurried, and I am grateful for both. Then he pauses, sets his pen down. "Did your grandmother ever mention wanting a particular scripture read?" he asks. There's a note on her file, but it's incomplete. Something about a psalm. I look at him. "Which psalm?" I say. It is not a question. He checks the file. It just says the shepherd one. He looks up. "Does that mean something to your family?" I tell him my grandmother was traditional. I tell him we will speak to the imam. I tell him we appreciate his thoroughness. I do not tell him that I am the only person in my family who knows what psalm she meant, and that I know it because she asked me to read it to her while she was dying, and that I have told no one about this, not even my mother. I spend the drive to her house telling myself the file note was already there, that she had arranged it herself, years ago, through someone at the hospital, that there is an ordinary explanation that I am not thinking of, because I am tired and grieving, and looking for patterns where there are only coincidences. The explanation holds well enough in the car. It starts to hold less well when I open her wardrobe. She kept things in organized layers, clothes on top, folded with the precision of someone who had been folding clothes for 70 years. Beneath the clothes, blankets. Beneath the blankets, the things she considered worth keeping, but did not need to see. Old photographs, a tin of buttons, a notebook with a red cover that I recognize as the kind she bought at the stationery shop near her old apartment. I open the notebook, expecting Arabic prayers. I find Arabic prayers, page after page in her careful hand, the same supplications she had said every morning for as long as I can remember, the words worn smooth from repetition. Then one page that is different. Not a supplication, not a prayer from any tradition I recognize in the form of it. A different kind of text, written in the same careful hand but more slowly, I think. The letters slightly more deliberate, like someone copying something they want to get exactly right. Psalm 23, in Arabic, written by hand, complete from first verse to last. No date, no explanation. No indication of where she encountered it or why she wrote it down or when. Just the text, sitting between 2 pages of morning prayers as if it had always belonged there. I stand at her wardrobe for a long time. The rationalization I reach for is that she must have encountered it in some interfaith context. A hospital pamphlet. A conversation with someone. There are explanations for how a Muslim woman in her 70s could have come to copy out a Christian psalm in her private notebook without anyone in her family knowing. I reach for each of these explanations in sequence and hold them up and look at them. They are not wrong, exactly. They simply do not feel like enough. I am replacing the notebook when her neighbor calls to me from the hallway. He is very old, older than she was, with the particular courtesy of people who learned their manners in a different era. He has brought food, covered in foil, which he holds out to me with both hands. "She was a remarkable woman," he says. "I will miss our conversations." I thank him. I ask what they talked about. He considers this. "Many things," he says. "Her garden, her grandchildren." He pauses. "The Good Shepherd. She always smiled when I mentioned him. A very particular smile." He looks at me carefully. "You have the same smile, you know. Just now when you came to the door." I drive home with the food on the passenger seat, and the notebook in my bag, and that sentence sitting somewhere in the center of my chest, like a stone dropped in still water, still moving outward. I eat dinner without tasting it. I sit with my family while they talk, and the conversation reaches me from a slight distance, like sound through a closed window. When everyone leaves, I wash the dishes and dry them and put them away, and each action feels like I am performing a version of myself that I am not quite inhabiting. I go to bed. I do not sleep. The room is dark and the temperature is slightly too warm, and I shift onto my left side, then my back, then my right side, and none of these positions resolves into anything like rest. The ceiling is a pale rectangle in the dark. The streetlight outside comes through the curtain in a thin line across the floor. I check my phone. 1:17. I think about the funeral coordinator's clipboard. I think about the note on her file. I think about every possible person who could have put it there, and when, and why, and whether she arranged it herself during a lucid afternoon that none of us knew about. This reasoning holds for approximately 8 minutes. Then it begins to develop small holes that I cannot stop noticing. 1:34. I think about the notebook. I think about the specific quality of those letters, the carefulness of them. I think about what it means to copy something carefully. You copy carefully what you want to keep. You copy carefully what matters to you. She had written those words deliberately, over a long period of time, pressing the pen with the patience of someone doing something that felt important. For how long? I had not looked for a date because there was no date. For how long had she known those words? 1:58. The ceiling. The line of streetlight on the floor. I close my eyes, and my grandmother's face is there, turned toward the corner, and I open my eyes again. 2:15. And I am lying on my back, thinking about those 2 syllables she whispered. I have been trying not to think about them, because thinking about them does not produce any result I can do anything with. I do not know what they were. I have turned them over in my memory 20 times, and I still cannot make them into a word from any language I know. They were not Arabic. They were not English. They were something she said toward the corner, like a response to something she'd been asked. Like an answer. Not a greeting, an answer. 3:07. I am staring at the ceiling, and the thought arrives the way thoughts arrive in the dark, at 3:07, without permission, landing fully formed. She already knew the words. I was reading Psalm 23 to my grandmother, and she was mouthing the words before I spoke them, not following along, preceding me. She was not reading with me. She was reciting from memory something she had known before I opened the Bible. She knew it by heart. In 70-something years of living inside our family, in our home, in our tradition, where that text was never spoken, she knew it by heart. I lie there with this thought in the dark, at 3:07, and I cannot file it. Every folder I reach for is the wrong shape. The thought does not fit the space I am trying to put it in. And after a while I stop trying and simply lie there with it sitting on my chest, patient and heavy, and not going anywhere. Somewhere after 4 o'clock something, that is not quite sleep, arrives. It is more like the body making a unilateral decision to stop. I am not aware of crossing the threshold. I am simply on one side of it, and then, without transition, on the other. I wake knowing something is different, before I know what it is. It is not a feeling of resolution. I have not decided anything. I have not arrived anywhere. It is something structural, the way a wall looks different after a crack appears in it. The wall is still a wall, still standing, still doing what it was built to do, but there is a line in it now that was not there before, and you cannot look at the wall without seeing the line. I get dressed and make coffee, and stand at the kitchen window while it cools. The children from the apartment downstairs are playing in the courtyard. I have heard them every morning for 3 years, and registered them the way you register traffic sounds, as background. This morning I stand at the window and actually watch them. A girl in a yellow shirt, chasing her younger brother around the single tree in the center of the courtyard, both of them completely absorbed, completely present, not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. I watch them for longer than I mean to. I am late getting to her house. I spend the morning going through her things systematically, making the lists that need to be made. This is useful work, and I am good at it, and I focus on it with the particular gratitude you feel for tasks that require just enough concentration to occupy the front of your mind. In the drawer of her writing desk, I find an envelope. It is sealed. My name is written on the front in her hand, the same hand as the notebook, the same hand as the pressed leaf. I hold it for a moment. I tell myself it is probably practical, a note about something she wanted me to have. Instructions about the plant on her balcony or the location of some document. I open it. The note inside is one sentence. If I ask for the shepherd, don't be afraid. I read it 4 times. I sit down in her desk chair with the note in my hands, and I sit there for a long time while the apartment is quiet around me. The plant on the balcony moves slightly in the wind, coming through the gap in the door. Her reading glasses are folded on the corner of the desk. The worn patch on the prayer rug beside her bed, where her forehead had touched the floor 10,000 times, catches the afternoon light. She wrote this before she was sick. The paper says so, slightly yellowed at the edges, the ink fully dried to the particular flatness of old ink. She wrote this, and sealed it, and put my name on it, and kept it in her desk drawer, and waited for me to find it. She had been waiting for something long before any of us knew she was leaving. I do not cry. I sit with the note in the afternoon light in her quiet apartment, and I feel the crack in me open another millimeter, something structural shifting, and I do not cry. I fold the note carefully and put it in the same pocket as the dried leaf. The hospital waiting area is beige and fluorescent and smells like recycled air, and the particular cleanness that is not cleanliness, but the absence of smell. I am here to sign the last of the paperwork, a form I should have completed 2 days ago and have been putting off without admitting to myself that I was putting it off. The chairs are the stacking kind, orange plastic, arranged in rows, that no one sits in rows. A young couple is in the far corner sharing earphones. A man in a delivery jacket is asleep with his chin on his chest. An elderly man in ordinary clothes, grey trousers, a light jacket, the kind of clothes that belong to no particular decade, sits 2 chairs away from where I choose to sit. I take my paperwork from my bag. I find the pen I need. I begin filling in the date. She recognized the shepherd, the elderly man says, because he never stopped visiting her. I look up. He is looking at me with the mild expression of someone who has said a perfectly ordinary thing. I'm sorry, I say. He smiles. It is a kind smile. Not warm in the performed way of people who work in hospitals, but kind in the way of someone who has known something for a long time and is not in a hurry. I look down at my paperwork. I look back at him. Do you know my family? I ask. He does not answer. He smiles again, a different quality to it now, as if the question itself is somehow beside the point. I look down at the form in my hands. I am trying to locate a thought, trying to decide what to ask next, trying to organize the fact of what he has just said into something I can respond to rationally. I look up. The chair is empty. The orange plastic chair is empty in the way chairs are empty when they have been empty for some time. I look left and right along the row. The young couple is still sharing earphones. The delivery man is still asleep. I go to the reception desk. I describe the man, ordinary height, grey trousers, light jacket, white hair, sitting in the 3rd chair from the left in the row beside the window. The receptionist checks the log. No elderly man had signed in. She calls someone. A security guard comes and looks at the camera feed covering that section of the waiting area, and I stand beside him and watch the footage from the last 15 minutes. The chair is empty in the footage. Not recently empty. The chair appears empty from the beginning of the footage. Only I am visible, sitting 2 seats away from an empty chair, looking up from my paperwork, appearing to speak to no one, looking back down. I complete the paperwork. I sign my name at the bottom. I fold the papers and put them in the envelope and hand them to the receptionist and walk out of the hospital into the evening air. And I stand on the pavement outside, and I stand there for a while. She recognized the shepherd because he never stopped visiting her. What would have to be true for a stranger to say that? I take the long way home. I do not turn on the lights when I get back to her apartment. I have her key because I am the one who has been managing things, and without deciding to come here, I have come here, and I stand in her entrance in the dark for a moment before moving through to her bedroom. The room holds her presence the way rooms do, for a while, after the person is gone, in the specific arrangement of objects, in the smell that is hers and no one else's, in the worn patch on the prayer rug that records 10,000 mornings of devotion. The Bible is not here. I left it at the hospital. But her prayer scarf is folded on the table beside her bed, and I sit in her chair, and I put my hands in my lap, and I am very still. The sealed note is in my pocket. The dried leaf is in my pocket. If I ask for the shepherd, don't be afraid. He always keeps promises. She recognized the shepherd because he never stopped visiting her. I sit with all three of these in the dark and the quiet here is different from the quiet at home. It is her quiet, the specific silence of a space shaped around one person's particular way of moving through it, and sitting inside it feels like sitting inside a question I do not have the vocabulary to ask. Then the room changes, not with light, not first with anything I can see, with stillness. A quality of stillness that is different from quiet, the way a held breath is different from an exhale, not the absence of movement, but the suspension of it. Everything paused, the air itself waiting. The temperature drops slightly, or I become aware of it differently, the coolness settling against my arms and the back of my neck. There is a pressure in my ears like altitude, gentle and insistent, and the sound of the street below goes to a distance that is too far for the actual distance. I do not move. I am aware of my breathing in a way I am not usually aware of it. I am aware of my hands in my lap. I am aware of the exact position of my body in the chair, as if I have become a precise and specific thing in a space that is becoming something other than what it was a moment ago. Then, being known. This is the only way I can explain it. Not being seen. Being seen is a surface thing, eyes on a face. This is deeper than that. This moves through the surface and through everything beneath it, through the part of me that completed that paperwork today, through the part of me that stood in the waiting room and watched the camera footage show an empty chair, through the part of me that read Psalm 23 to my grandmother while my hands shook, through the part of me that put a dried leaf in my pocket to throw away, and did not throw it away, through the places I had not looked at myself, through the reasons I had filed the interruptions away so quickly, through the particular shape of my resistance, which I had called rationalism, and which I now could not call anything at all, because it was simply there, visible, known. This lasts for a period of time I cannot measure. It could be seconds. It is probably not only seconds. Then I see him. He stands in the place where my grandmother used to pray, at the far edge of the worn patch on the rug, in the space where she placed her forehead against the floor, 10,000 times in devotion to God. He does not fill the room the way I would have expected, does not blaze or overwhelm. He is simply present in the way that makes everything else in the room more present. The folded scarf, the nightstand, the pale light through the curtain, as if his being there makes the room more itself, not less. He looks at me. It is the same compassion that I saw reflected in my grandmother's face in the last moments of her life. I recognize it because I saw it then, in her, pointed at the corner of that hospital room, and now I understand what it looked like because I can see the source of it. He says, "The shepherd she trusted is the shepherd calling you." That is all. That is everything. I am crying before I know I have started. Not the crying of grief, which I know, which I have been doing for 3 days. This is different. This is the crying of something that has been held under pressure for a long time, releasing. The specific relief of it, the shaking in my chest that is not pain. When I look up, the room is her room again, still and quiet, her prayer scarf folded on the table, the worn patch on the rug, but the peace remains. It stays in the room the way warmth stays in a space after the source of it is gone, present and real, and not diminishing. I sit in her chair for a while longer. Then I go to the kitchen and drink a glass of water. Then I go to the bed that I have been sleeping in these 3 nights of managing her affairs, and I lie down, and my eyes close before I have finished the thought I was forming. I sleep without dreaming. The peace is there when I close my eyes, and there when I wake. Smaller and more ordinary, but there. 1 week later, I walk back into the hospital chapel carrying her Bible, which I had gone back for, which I had asked the staff to keep for me. I sit in one of the chairs near the front, where the light comes in through the colored glass and makes patterns on the floor. I open to Psalm 23, and the dried leaf is still pressed between the pages, and I leave it there, and I read from the first verse to the last, without rushing, without checking the door, without keeping my voice low. When I reach the valley of the shadow of death, I do not pause. I keep reading. The words belong in the air, I understand now. She knew this before I did. 1 month later, I sit across from her neighbor in his kitchen with a glass of tea between my hands, and he answers my questions without making me feel small for having them. He has a Bible with many passages underlined, and he opens it when I ask him to show me where something is, and his hands move through the pages the way hands move through something known. I have been reading the Gospels each morning for 2 weeks, sitting at my grandmother's table in her apartment, which I have not been able to give up yet, which still holds her quiet. Each morning I read a little further. Each morning the questions change shape slightly. I do not have answers yet. I am not sure I understand everything I am reading, but I am reading, and I am not afraid of what I might find. 1 year later, I am sitting beside a hospital bed in a room that smells of antiseptic and the particular stillness of machines doing their careful work. And the family gathered at the edges of the room has the look of people who have been here long enough that the chairs have begun to feel permanent. The man in the bed has asked me, through his daughter who called me, because someone told her I sometimes came, if I would read something. The daughter had told him about the shepherd, she said. He asked if someone could read it. I opened the Bible. The worn cover, the thin pages, the dried olive leaf, still pressed between the same 2 psalms. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The room does something. I notice it, and I keep reading, because my grandmother taught me this. You keep reading. You stay in the words. You let the room do what the room does, and you keep your voice steady, and you trust the shepherd to find the people he is looking for. I have reached the valley of the shadow of death, and I do not slow down, and I do not look up, and I keep reading.